Welcome to Unit 6 of the e-learning course on advocating for evaluation. This unit presents strategies for strengthening partnerships to influence evaluation policies and systems. My name is Tessie Katsambas, and I'm the co-chair of the Eval Partners Task Force on promoting an enabling environment for evaluation. This video lecture will take you through the following topics. Defining partnerships, where we will review the roles and requirements of different types of partnerships. The benefits and challenges of working in partnerships, and why they're an essential component of successful advocacy. And lessons and strategies for building and managing successful partnerships. Let's take a look at the different ways we can organize partnerships. We will discuss three different types of partnerships: networks, alliances, and coalitions. Networks are loose, flexible associations of people or groups. They come together around a common interest or a common concern to share information and ideas. An example of a network is a nascent voluntary organization for professional evaluation, where people have come together around their common interest in evaluation. Alliances are more focused on a specific objective. The relationships are shorter term and limited in time usually, and they're less demanding on its members. An example of an alliance is VOPEs and parliaments. They are quite different organizations, but they have come together in a focused way around a common interest on evidence-based policymaking. Finally, coalitions. They're groups of organizations that have come together around common goals. They have a more formal structure, and they require far more work than networks to run and manage. An example of a coalition is Eval Partners, a movement that's brought together a lot of organizations around common goals. It has a formal structure, and it demands a lot of investment of time. So let's look at some examples. First of all, let's take a look at networks. TESA is a network of academic institutions that have come together informally to exchange ideas and learn from each other in order to develop stronger evaluation curricula. SEAP is the Nascent Evaluation Association of Albania, which is now a loose network of people interested in evaluation. They are just beginning to think about how they might get organized. So nascent VOPEs act as networks. Alliances bring together a wide variety of partners. Over on the left, the German Agency for Technical Cooperation, GIZ, Japan Bank for International Cooperation, and the American Red Cross have come together to focus on capacity building and dissemination of information through evaluation. Over on the left, SLEVA and the Parliament have come together. That's the Sri Lanka Evaluation Association. They've developed a partnership to promote conferences and professional development around evaluation, and they have gained a lot of recognition and credibility. In fact, the celebration of Eval Year will build on this relationship in Sri Lanka. Then over here on the bottom left, the Evaluation Society of Kenya is a partnership with the has come together in a partnership with the Monitoring and Evaluation Directorate, along with other partners, which has increased the visibility of the association, but also worked to build evaluation capacity in the government. Last but not least, an example that we will explore later on in more depth. In Malaysia, the Malaysian Evaluation Society has come together with private sector and parliament in a tripartite alliance. They've come together to promote evidence-based policymaking and also for the private sector to have a role in that process. So it's a very interesting alliance, and as I said, we will explore it a little bit further in this presentation. Now, coalitions, examples of coalitions. Here you see one country coalition. An example of a country coalition is the Canadian Evaluation Society, CES. And then two regional coalitions, RELAC, which is a coalition of Latin America and the Caribbean, and EVALMENA. This is the evaluation associations of Middle East and North Africa that have come together. And finally, an example of a global coalition, EvalPartners, that you're all familiar with. So as you can see, in recent years, we have had several partnerships, powerful partnerships that have sprung up in evaluation and that have been instrumental in the progress we have been making. More examples of successful partnerships can be found in the link on your screen, and these partnerships have been supported through the peer-to-peer support program of EvalPartners. Through the peer-to-peer program, we have been strengthening institutional capacities in these partnerships. Together, organizations that support evaluation have been advocating for improved national evaluation systems and policies. And together, they have also promoted adopting principles of equity-focused and gender-responsive evaluation in different countries. So that's very exciting. Takeaways on defining partnerships. Effective advocacy for evaluation is unquestionably strengthened by partnerships. As our VOPs mature, we move from informal networks to more structured coalitions that have a chance to have a much more powerful impact. And we come together in focused alliances to join forces with other groups that support evidence-based policymaking. So we need to keep an open mind in our advocacy strategies about recognizing and connecting with groups that can amplify our voice. So now let's look at some of the benefits of working together in partnerships and some of the challenges. A clear benefit is that we now have a stronger political voice and therefore greater power and enhanced access to decision makers. We have credibility and visibility that is higher than if we work alone. A group can get more attention than an individual, or a collection of groups can get more attention than one group. We have a consistent message that really covers a much wider audience. So this kind of advocacy through partnerships really widens our coverage. Partnerships provide an opportunity to learn from different experiences, and these knowledge exchange opportunities are both informative and energizing. Together in partnerships, we start to develop greater access to resources, both financial and human resources. And we are really strengthening civil society, promoting inclusion and a more democratic culture. So we have greater participation in these important concepts of evaluation. An example of the benefits of partnerships, working in partnerships, is the EvalPartners Coalition. Through the EvalPartners Coalition or initiative, we are now heard, evaluators are heard by governments, OECD DAC, parliaments, and other groups, foundations, etc. We have a seat at the table in dialogue with the United Nations Evaluation Group, UNEG. With OECD DAC, we have participated in the Capacity Strengthening Task Force, and with bilateral organizations. Now we bring an organized voice, so it's easier for them to invite us to be at the table. In terms of our message, we are promoting Evalueer, and we have many different groups promoting Evalueer and getting ready to participate in it in 2015. And we've come together with new groups to promote evidence-based policymaking, equity, and gender equality through evaluation. In peer-to-peer grants, there's clear evidence of learning and exchanges, and learning that translates to action, which is the most powerful kind. We have seen great success in our advocacy and institutional toolkit workshops in Yaoundé at the AFRIA conference. And we have seen really unprecedented numbers of people coming to the e-learning courses offered under the auspices of Eval Partners, which promote new knowledge and skills in evaluation. We have attracted funding from several sources and have been actually quite successful in that. And we have really activated a tremendous volunteer action that is just inspiring and energizing. Finally, we have modeled inclusion internally and externally. We advocate for social justice in policymaking through evaluation, but also as an initiative, Eval Partners has really brought together with equal power several different kinds of partners, and that's really exciting. So, challenges. Coalitions demand time commitment from its members, and we need to be cognizant and respectful of that. Now, as coalitions come together or different kinds of partnerships come together, not all partners are involved in all aspects of that advocacy, and those not involved may feel left out, so we need to pay attention to that. Organizations may need to compromise on their positions on issues of tactics or more substantive issues when advocating through a coalition or even a network or an alliance. And so we need to be open to that, and sometimes that can be difficult in deciding how to do it and how far to go. Power is not always distributed equally among coalition members, and there's danger in that. There's a danger in someone or one organization overpowering and dominating others, and then potentially we don't have a true partnership, but we have a different kind of relationship. So we need to be attentive to that. Individual members who work really, really hard may not get recognition for their work in a coalition or a partnership of any kind, and so we have to pay attention to that as well. That can be a big disincentive. Finally, poor internal communications may exclude some partners from decision making. And this is an issue in evaluation we pay very close attention to. People may speak different languages, for example. They may not have connectivity at the level, at a level that makes it easy to be in touch with them. So we need to pay attention. Some strategies that we have used to address these challenges in Eval Partners, but in other partnerships as well, are as follows. In terms of time limitations, it helps to focus the work of each person, to share and to rotate so that people don't burn out. In terms of the feeling of exclusion and not working on everything at once, which is impossible, in Eval Partners, not all VOPs are involved in all task forces. So we need to invest in building trust, because that is really the magic center of successful partnerships. When people trust each other, they have patience, they can share their power and their support with each other. And so it's very important to pay attention to that. In working on messages that satisfy different partners, especially in alliances where we have some different kinds of partners coming together, we've had to work hard to find the right messaging. Another example of this kind of give and take is between the global initiative of Eval Partners and local needs of countries, and countries that are very different between them, among themselves. Now, in terms of power inequities, newer, smaller VOPEs have fewer volunteers. So naturally, they do not have as much power and involvement and voice. So we, at Develop Partners, have a strong commitment to encourage and include them, and to make sure that we can include them through, not only through responsibilities that we give to them, but also simply by having surveys or asking them, making sure that they get support and they get some priority and financial support as well. Unquestionably, personal sacrifice and commitment of individual members benefit the group. So we need to take time to appreciate each other. There's no one outside the partnership to appreciate it. But when a hardworking member feels that appreciation and that recognition within the group, it really means a world of difference, and it builds on these other issues that we talked about. It builds trust, it builds inclusion, and comfort with the different kinds of initiatives that people take and the different kinds of positions. Finally, keeping everyone informed is important, and it requires a big investment. So we need to keep paying attention to communication. In fact, what we say is communicate, communicate, and over-communicate, and you won't go wrong. So we need to think about languages, we need to think about time, we need to balance in-person, in writing, on Skype, and really work a nice web of communication in partnerships. An example of that I promised you we would return to Malaysia, and here we are. An example of an impressive tripartite collaboration has happened in Malaysia. Their goal has been to build a conceptual framework for evaluation that is more inclusive. And in their case, it includes the public sector, the Ministry of Finance, the private sector through an organization called Center for Development and Research in Evaluation International, and civil society, the Malaysian Evaluation Society. The government provides the right policy environment and support. The private sector has provided institutional and technical support for evaluation, and civil society has given a legitimacy to the process of technical design, development, testing, and capacity support of different tools and techniques that now the government and civil society are agreeing is the right way to promote evaluation in the Malaysian public sector. On this slide, I encourage you to look at this slide on your own and to see the details around different roles that each of these groups are playing in Malaysia. It's a really fascinating example, and when they first put it together, we at Develop Partners were very excited that they were able to find these wonderful synergies between different partners. So the success of this model in Malaysia has been that evaluation is now factored into the performance, planning, and management agenda as an integral component rather than an end process, an afterthought. And that evaluation capacity development in Malaysia is now guided and driven by this integrated multidimensional approach, rather than seeing it as a training, just having a training solution. So now, what does it take? What are the lessons that we've learned about building and managing successful partnerships? Let's start with an example. The RELAC, the regional network in Latin America and the Caribbean, had some significant challenges as it started forming and organizing itself. The demand on volunteers made it hard for people to keep involved in a steady way. The burden on the executive committee was excessive. There was low demand for accountability, so people started to take some initiatives that weren't completely agreed to by everybody else. And there was an unclear mechanism to resolve conflicts and disagreements. Finally, they were resource strapped as they had no membership fee. RELAC came together and came up with some really interesting and successful solutions that worked for RELAC. Two of them. Number one, delegating and sharing responsibilities with network members who generally do not participate in the executive committee enabled the executive committee to relieve itself of specific tasks and at the same time engage others. And then in 2012, the executive committee discussed and updated its internal operating rules in order to facilitate communication and communications, problem solving, and decision making. So these two strategies were a breakthrough for RELAC and important lessons for what needs to happen and needs to be built into the RELAC network, regional network. As we've looked at our experiences across the world, these are, we have some lessons in these three categories. And each of the categories is a lesson in itself. So first of all, focus is critical in our partnerships for advocacy. We want to use the resource of partnerships really well. And there are three sub-lessons under that. Be clear about the advocacy goals. Focus on one or two key stakeholders. And resolve and be clear what your VOPE will and will not do in advocacy. What is it in that give and take? What is it that we're going to compromise on and will do, and what is outside the boundaries? Remember that the most important thing you have, the most important resource, is your time as volunteers. And so focusing your time in the best way to leverage the partnership and achieve your advocacy goals. The second thing is around structure. Structure is important, and especially for larger VOPEs or as your VOPE grows, think about setting up an advocacy steering committee, delegating this to a group of people, and then establish task forces to plan and coordinate different advocacy activities. So if, for example, you're thinking of a campaign, a poster campaign, or if you're thinking of coming together convenings, or if you're thinking about developing a relationship, investing in a relationship with the government, each of these can be very time consuming. So really think about separating out who works on what so that you don't have burnout. And finally, process. Process is very important. Develop a code of conduct to ensure mutual respect and accountability. Enforcing a code of conduct really builds trust and being able to speak openly about issues. Then assess progress periodically and take it seriously and make changes where necessary. Allow in this assessment for everybody to speak. If one person voices a concern, other people feel it too. So it's very useful to take time to resolve these issues. And finally, communicate as much as you can, recognizing that this is it's a serious time commitment, but it's still one of the most valuable things that you can do. So remember, advocacy partnership structures can vary. It isn't one size fits all here. So thinking about your partnerships based on who you have access to and what your goals are, and what's possible and the connections that your members have is important in deciding the partnerships that will work best for you. Context is crucial. What works for one campaign and collaboration may not work for another. In Sri Lanka, the relationship between the Sri Lankan Evaluation Association and Parliament has really ignited a special energy in terms of evaluation. So along with the government, Sri Lanka is a model for how these three have come together. In another country, that may not be the right strategy because the relationships aren't there in quite the same way. So take a look at your own context. Finally, your most valuable asset is your time. So focus your advocacy strategically and focus your partnership strategically. Thank you very much for taking this video lecture.